Yin style bagua is named for Yin Fu. Yin Fu was very fond of the martial arts. He had trained Shaolin boxing, Arhat boxing, springing legs, light body skills, and became proficient with a weapon known as the scholar pens. At around 20 years old, he became a disciple of Dong Haichuan, the founder of baguachjang. Dong Haichuan, in accord with the Bagua martial theory, taught Yin Fu to change his existing martial practices in addition to taking in the flavor unique to the Bagua school. So Yin style developed its own characteristics and strong points. The basic palm shape of Yin style is known as the ox tongue palm. The basic stepping is the natural step. We open horizontally and enter in at an angle. Vigorous and powerful, taking the shortest path to the target, and the movements are hard and ferocious, having an abundance of springing and shaking force. It is known for its ferociousness, power, and fighting expertise. When the hands go out, it is said to be cold, crisp, and fast. There is also a great emphasis placed on leg techniques, stepping placement, and the use of the waist and body. Over time, this came to be known as Yin style bagua. In the applications of Yin style bagua, there are no feints. But that is relatively speaking. So, when I put out a strike, if you don't block, it's real. If you block, then I change. So you should spend time researching this aspect of the art. So, in the applications of Yin style bagua, objectively speaking, you've got to have a certain amount of developed strength. After you've gotten that developed strength and are well versed in and have an understanding of the techniques, you can apply them. You should spend time thinking over the sensitivity of the hands. At the start, no matter whether it's developmental practice or applications practice, there are stages. For example, with the lion system, when you're practicing, you must have the four fingers held taut, the thumb tucked in. The thenar and hypothenar eminence are held together, and that will develop finger strength. The wrist must be horizontally level and vertically straight. This way you'll have a good use of force, and while practicing, the qi and blood will flow smoothly and unimpeded. So when you normally practice the sweeping strike, you do so in this way. But once you get to a certain level, when this hand is going to sweep, this thumb should open out, pressing down. These fingers should separate out. This hand protects. If it's all closed off, it's not very natural. So practicing development and usage are separated. People often say, how you train it is how you use it. These are two questions. I often say, you want to follow the rules when you train, but when you go to use it, you can choose not to follow the rules. You want to seriously train. When you go to use it, you should be relaxed. If you're trying too hard to get force during use, it will be confined. So you must spend a lot of time training and thinking over what is contained in the art, different levels in the art, and various points of change within the techniques. I'd like to introduce the applications of Yin style bagua. This time, the focus will be primarily on presenting techniques of the lion system. And then we'll introduce linking in some techniques from the other animal systems. Opening the opponent. I'll introduce a few methods for opening the opponent up. First, when the opponent attacks, open at his extremity. Pay attention to placing your supporting hand below the elbow of your attacking arm to protect against the opponent's elbow from striking you. The second kind would be to sweep strike attack his upper arm. This will stop the opponent's attack. Striking the upper arm can produce a break. Speaking of the skeletal structure, there's only one bone here, and this bone is very fragile. It is easy to break. Another kind would be to open using the backhand to press on the opponent while the front arm carries out a sweeping palm. This way is also effective. We mentioned two types using the front arm, one at the extremity and one at the upper arm. Then you could use the back arm to open the opponent's attack. These are three methods for opening. In addition, you could lure the opponent into opening up. First, put out the right hand, then use the left hand to slap strike the opponent. Another type would be to enter and immediately snatch the opponent's hand. When we meet, first obstruct one of the opponent's arms, essentially causing the opponent to lose a certain amount of ability to defend. This is a pure type of snatching hand. That's all of this type that we'll introduce now. In the future, according to the situation, we can add depth to this. Next, while opening the opponent's arm, I'll introduce three different methods of using strength. The first kind is moving with the force carrying downward. You're borrowing the opponent's strength. Another type is while opening the opponent, you move with the force and execute a carrying leading motion. You could also close off his leg to attack his vital parts. Another is once you've begun to open the opponent and he uses strength to try and clear your arm out, you then turn your arm over and bring it back in, and then the left arm, moving from underneath the right arm, will press downward on the opponent and carry him down. This is a method of borrowing strength. It is your choice to close off the leg or not. Of these three different changes, this would be moving the opponent forward. Next, the second of the three different changes. After sweep striking the opponent and controlling or closing off his arm, move in a horizontal motion. Pay attention to the right arm pulling back slightly, and the left arm changing into an upright palm and rubbing against the opponent's elbow, basically causing an injury or joint break to defeat the opponent. This is the first kind. The second kind, when applying this technique, if the opponent resists with a great deal of strength, you must pay attention to change your use of force. The right hand slightly turns back inward. The left arm moves into a carrying upward position. This technique is also known as Zhousang, shoulders the saber. That is the second kind. The third kind. In this situation, if going upward or forward proved to be difficult, you could pull his arm backward and then follow up with a strike to the opponent. You must pay attention that the left arm has a slight hooking downward and the right hand adds a push. You could step in front of or behind the opponent, both are fine. So, when opening the opponent, moving in a horizontal plane, we'll just introduce these three types of changes. Next, we'll introduce three different types of changes in the third technique. Attacking. Opening the opponent, pressing down, and you can use a shooting palm. This is one type. In addition, you could hook down the opponent and strike his face. In this situation, when opening the opponent, If you feel that the opponent has discovered your intention and wants to withdraw his arm, you listen to his force, and using not the whole hand, but just your middle finger, and at the same time you follow the opponent's force with the right arm, entering in and striking. In this technique, there is a double meaning. The first is a direct strike. The second is if the opponent strikes with his other arm, at the moment of his strike, you could use this arm to block him off. To close off his ability to use the back arm. In addition, at the instant when you're opening the opponent, you could directly use a strike. This hand could be a palm or in a fist with a hooking and scraping movement. Either is fine. You could also directly strike upwards. But no matter which of these techniques you use, you must be aware that they all contain Bagua's methods of kicking, striking, throwing, and grasping. So different techniques can be combined with different striking methods or different throwing methods according to the level of your martial development and according to the special features of the opponent being in a favorable or unfavorable situation. Talking about opening the opponent, you could use one or both hands. You could use a sweep strike to open. You could also use a cutting strike to open. We could make contact at the extremity. We could make contact at mid-arm. We could use a double hand opening. This double hand opening could be done with both hands striking, or one hand capturing and one hand striking. I feel that usually the lion system of yin-style bagua best uses the sweeping palm to open. Secondly, we could also use the cutting strike to open. Striking upward, smashing here is fine too. In addition, if the opponent punches, the hooking strike. I feel that in opening, these give a better result than the chopping or blocking strikes. They can easily open the opponent, but each one has a different amount of strength. So when you train, you must go according to your individual preferences in carrying out the applications. When you're opening the opponent's arm with the cutting strike, you must pay attention to this slight movement, then advance step, and strike here. That will execute a knockdown of the opponent. Opening hand, turn the arm, and follow with a strike to the opponent. Then you can strike here. Pay attention to the multiple points of contact. There are many different applications and uses. Through the practice of the lion system, sweeping palm, what we're focusing on here is the sweeping palm. You can use a smashing strike to open, a chopping strike to open, use hooking, they're all acceptable. Here I can use a hooking strike. All these are good applications of the hooking strike. Here I sweep, then I chop. That is a type of chopping shock strike. A padding shock. A shock strike here, a shock here, and a padding shock. If I still don't have it, I can turn my leg. Pay attention to the turning of the leg. A coiling motion. According to different forces, do different techniques. Sometimes I go to open him. The opponent has a lot of strength. This way is helping out. Pay attention. Doesn't matter which technique. There is a moving upward strength. There is a moving downward strength. There is horizontal force. there's an opening force. So you want to think a lot about this aspect and practice a lot, of course. No matter how you apply a technique, it will never be airtight. There are many unexpected things that can happen during the application of a technique. Through practice over time, you'll be able to reach your inherent potential. When you're practicing the application of techniques, or using them in a fight, you have to pay attention to each technique's subtle changes. According to the amount of strength the opponent has, his height, and the depth of his development, use differing forces. Look for different angles. For example, the sweeping strike. You don't want to directly cut in. You want to slightly whirl to the outside. It has the idea of whirling and carrying. In the moving with the force form, this arm doesn't directly come downward. It rises up. Then when you're almost but not quite at the point of contact, move downwards so you can easily twist and carry along. So a lot of sweeping techniques make use of twisting and carrying. Once you've struck the opponent's arm, you mustn't turn the arm over too early. Begin the technique, then when the opponent puts out a hand, you strike. When the opponent intercepts, you move with his force and carry his arm back and down. When carrying downward, this hand should slightly rotate inward. When the opponent begins to feel uncomfortable and wants to escape, you move with his force and cut him off at that moment. We often say that it's when his first burst of strength is used up, you must act to keep him from using his next burst of strength. When the opponent is in an uncomfortable position and he is trying to reset and find an appropriate angle, at that instant, as we often say, at the instant when he is changing, you carry out your strike. Then you can accomplish the different objectives of the sweeping strike. For the cutting strike, you must pay attention to use the four knuckles of the fist to smash pressure points on the opponent. For example, shou san li, qu chi, or at the back or behind the head. When you're smashing, there are many different approaches. You can directly smash downward. There's point smashing. There's arcing, cutting, or smashing. When you're executing this circling in strike, once you meet the opponent's force, move with and turn. So a circling in changes to an inside smash. So pay attention to the small changes in the technique. It's best to think of this as a transforming cutting force. When changing, use the wrist to twist in an angled downward direction. Move with and enter in to smash strike the opponent's lower ribs or zhangmen point. You can go according to differing situations. You can turn in and smash strike the inside of the upper arm. If you smash here and the opponent resists, you can turn over and inside smash. When applying these, there must be very small changes using the hands. We often say in Yin style bagua, strike straight, emit round. With the chopping strike is straight up and down, and you want to lower the waist. Close off the opponent, including this chop. When you meet the opponent's arm, you can grasp. So in the midst of these techniques is hidden kicking, grasping, throwing, and striking. Sometimes you go in and directly point strike. Pay attention to the hand motion. The edge of the palm presses up on the opponent's chin to harm the vertebrae at the back of the neck. With hooking, pay attention to the whirling in of the forearms, including the whirling of the downward hooking, including the opening hook, the forearm rotation at just the right moment. You could do a double hook, then change to the techniques previously mentioned. Elbow strike, wrapping throw. Both are fine. So a lot of things are dependent on how you practice. We say in yin-style bagua that practice makes perfect. How do you get good? Practice a lot. A technique done 1,000 times becomes familiar to you. Once you're familiar with it, you can be said to have true skillfulness with the technique. So you must be aware of a lot of minute changes. For example, the shocking strike. Here, the rolling shocking strike. 1, the forearm must whirl, and the waist must lower downward. You must sink your chi. You want to cut off the opponent. Your force can come forward, go in, or to the front of your body. So from the point of view of the use of different forces in a technique, even though the hand itself has various changes, you must also pay attention to the appropriate angles at which to use the technique. With the blocking strike, the body lowers. You must pay attention to the arm having an abundantly strong charging in force. It's not that you put up an arm just for the sake of blocking. The position that you block strike at is also very important. You want to block at the root of the upper arm. If you block and he has a lot of strength, you can move with and carry strike. There are a lot of aspects to the execution of a carrying strike. 1, your hand shouldn't grasp the opponent too forcefully. Using the ring and pinky fingers, then your other hand can help out by pressing on his arm. Your elbow holds the opponent. You're making full use of your elbow here. The ways to use the elbow include nailing elbow, fanning elbow, dropping elbow. What we use a lot in yin style more than other styles is the holding elbow. Techniques such as hold the moon in your arms would be ways of using a holding elbow. Seizing and grasping, through the use of different techniques and forces, require you to even more precisely learn through practice what is contained within. So you must make very appropriate use of these. With the carrying hand, if I'm afraid I can't get a grasp of his arm, you can push on your own forearm. This elbow sets against the opponent's elbow. If you slide off, then follow through with an elbow strike. Strike above, below, or go behind. These changes to some extent depend on your listening to the opponent. It's best that you don't try to resist against his force. Now, with the lion system, resisting against his force is also acceptable, but you want to do it accurately and at an advantageous angle, helping to add to the amount of attacking strength that you have. As you change quickly, carrying over, then coming back, this is also acceptable. Use the shoulder to set against the opponent's arm. You could elbow strike or hold the leg. No matter which technique, you must bait the opponent. If you don't elbow strike, it's difficult to hold the leg. If you elbow strike, he will concave in his chest and his leg will come up. Then you can move with him and be able to execute the technique. If you have good leg skill, you can coil his leg and lean against him. You can make use of all these different techniques and body movements. You must pay attention to the quick changes of the hands. Here, the hands must move at the same time. Making the opponent uncomfortable. From here, turn back in the other direction. So you must go according to the different situation to carry out different applications. Sometimes you can grasp attack the opponent. That way he'll come around to you. Grasp him that way. It's easy to get around him. Here I have a free hand. I've got him locked up. I can point press his solar plexus. Attack his Jiangmen point. This can be fatal. These techniques must be done to completion. We often say no matter which movement, you must do it to completion. Off by an inch and you're off by a mile. Your results will be lacking. Next, I'd like to introduce a way of opening the opponent using techniques in an interlocked succession. If the opponent attacks, after I open, I could strike in the way we just introduced. I could also do a carrying strike. So here the use of force is different. Or I could go here and cause the opponent discomfort. Changing here and here. Also a carrying strike. These techniques would be used when the opponent tries to get away or to take his arm away. The technique must be very well knit. 1, 2, 3. Here you must pay attention to the following. When you sweep strike the opponent, your sweeping arm moves downward a bit. Note the angle on this arm as I slightly grind and squeeze into the opponent's elbow. Pay attention to the use of force. The upright arm could use a greater force, or the capturing hand could use a greater amount of strength. Adjust according to the situation with the opponent and your own preferences to carry out this crisscrossed application. Second application. When you're changing, you want to pay attention to slightly release your grasp as this arm begins to pull back. At the same time, this hand makes a fist. Your wrist drops and presses against the opponent's wrist as you strike the opponent. While you are striking, if the opponent uses an outward strength to resist, you move with his force as your hand opens and captures downward. This arm moves with and pushes forward and rotates. You pull the opponent's arm straight, then bring him down. If you encounter a great deal of strength, the opponent resists and the technique becomes difficult to execute. You can use a seizing movement, turning over to the rear. These are some examples of a crisscross of force and application. In addition, when opening, you could directly strike. This is also acceptable. This is an example of applying the feet. When you go to strike and the opponent covers, hold to the chest, carrying and folding both will work. When the opponent presses down, whether he has moved his leg out or not, withdraw a step and make sure that you apply a twist and turn to the opponent's arm. Step here, and your shoulder crash strikes into the opponent's chest. Your leg springs straight to strike the bend in the opponent's leg. This is an example of a leg strike. In addition, once you open the opponent, you can change. This is also fine. You can also directly put the opponent down. You have to pay attention. This arm uses a smooth transforming motion. Don't wheel the arm around too much. Directly enter in. Your left arm pulls down on the opponent's right arm. Your right arm meets the opponent's left arm, then rotates to transform and remove the strength in his resisting arm. In addition, you could strike directly from the back, then go to the front, then change into the front and strike. When you are striking the opponent, move with and hook and scrape. Pay attention, you can't move in this way, or the opponent can bring his arm up. So when you're performing the hooking scraping motion, you want to listen to the opponent's force. So pay attention to the proper hand form, dropping down and controlling. When striking, make sure to move your head and body together in the direction of the strike. So your body, head, waist, and leg changes must be coordinated throughout. So we have three basic strike application methods. I sweep here, then a capturing sweep. Bring the arm down and I can execute an inside sweep. This is the rising, capturing, and inside sweep that we talk about. Or you can rising sweep, then inside sweep, a turn, then capturing sweep. Sometimes you can use one hand. A sweep going inward, then to here. If the opponent pushes, you can change, then change again. There are some techniques that you can use repeatedly. Some are, well, say I sweep here. It doesn't move. Sweep here. This would be an alternating use. I often refer to it as 1+1. One hand, then add in the other. Some are the repeated use. What I'm trying to say here is that you have to use your basic strikes appropriately. Sometimes you can sweep, cut, chop, then hook. You could use them in sequence. Sometimes you can sweep, 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 then add in a chop. That's fine too. Sometimes chop, chop, then still a chop. Sometimes hook, 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 then another hook. That's fine too. So when you're training, you want to pay attention to the fundamentals. Haste makes waste, but a constant effort yields sure success. Practice is how to get there. So when you're training, a lot of times you can move to the side or force the inside. Here the arm turns in. Here I hand off the opponent's arm. A horizontal sweep is fine too. I can hook kick here. If the opponent resists, go back the other way and strike here. If that doesn't work, I can go to here. These are all fine. If the opponent still has strength, I chop here. So you use different techniques that have different forces. You can also go here and then sweep from behind. That's fine too. Doesn't matter whether it's sweeping or smashing. Smashing behind the back. Smashing in front. If there is an opportunity to grasp, then grasp. If not, strike. Through training, you want to be alive in your usage. Next, I'll speak of some of the forms we use. Moving with the force, turning the back, holding and lifting, windmill, lying step, reversing the body, and unfolding. The Qian trigram lion system is the lion interlocking palm. You should, through training, try and make each technique link together. For example, the moving with the force form, using both arms. You could use a carrying strike, or you could extend the palm according to the situation. Then you follow through and sweep, strike the opponent. Pay attention to the advancing step to crowd the opponent. You can rising sweep or capturing sweep. According to the situation, you could use an elbow. Pulling elbow. All are fine. These are examples of striking with one arm. This is going from on top of the arm. You could change and go from underneath the arm. From underneath the arm, you could also do a capturing sweep or a rising sweep. there are a lot of changes in the moving with the force form that you must be aware of. In addition, you could use an inside sweep. Pay attention to striking and closing off the opponent's leg. Pay attention to the changes in stepping. You must make full use of stepping, body movement, and hand technique. When the opponent has great strength in his arm, make use of your leg. When the opponent has great strength in his leg, make use of your arm. In addition, pay attention to your supporting arm, combining the supporting arm into the technique. So try and get ample use of each part of your body when striking the opponent. In addition, turn the hand over. Here is the crossed arm break. You can gather up the arms in this way. There are a lot of different ways to execute these techniques. For example, I can move the arm back in and perform a handoff, then into a crossed arm break. This is fine. That is fine. According to your situation, you could use a moving with or moving against technique. If the opponent is very strong, I can add a shoulder to help me complete the technique. So this is when the hands are changing. In addition, I can go here and turn slightly. You can also sweep to here and change. Change into a chop. So according to different forces, you can change with different hand techniques. You could also do an elbow strike. Then it's easy to change from there. The arm just has to turn, and you can strike the opponent. So at this time, you must be aware that the hand should be upright. Don't have the hand turned back. This makes you vulnerable to injury. If your hand is upright, when the opponent goes to counter, you can change. This contains whirling and shoulder striking, so you must pay attention to these things. In addition, you can use the backhand to close off the opponent. This hand can wrap or execute a moving strike. Either one is fine. Sometimes you can also use a sweeping palm. Go according to what your situation is. Sometimes you can use a cutting strike. I'm freely showing various applications. Everyone can make use of them according to their familiarity and proficiency with the various forms. For example, the hooking strike can also be applied. See here, the shocking strike can also be used. Go according to the situation with the opponent. Sometimes you can change in this way. Sometimes I can strike here, to the inside. This hand doesn't move. Pay attention here. Through practice, open up your mind. Learning through practice these different techniques and body movements. In addition, going from underneath the arm is also the same. When you enter in with your leg, this arm should lift up at the opponent's elbow to block him off, then go in and strike. Pay attention to this hand protecting against the opponent's arm. The elbow here is resisting him. Here I am striking. Here I am protecting. The leg is also involved. There should be a minimum of 4 places on my body attacking the opponent. This comes from within the holding and lifting form practice. This is the first technique in the holding and lifting form. Sometimes the opponent gets up a hand very quickly, blocking you off. This just happens to be covered by the second series in the holding and lifting form, a carrying strike. The other hand can help out. If the opponent is very strong, your other hand can help out. If he is weaker, you can use one arm. What you must pay attention to is not to carry downward. If you do, you can be hit. You want to carry in an upward direction, your elbow holding off his other arm. This is one hand managing both of the opponent's arms. It is clearing the way for the other hand to enter in and make an effective strike to the opponent. So these techniques have many different ways to be executed. Sometimes, here I strike. This hand grasps. This is fine too. Here, this hand clears out of the way. That's fine to do too. You can also grasp the opponent. You have to go according to the situation. You can also trap and squeeze in a forward direction. You should use a different plan for different situations. Going this way is fine too. If you can't quite get it, the hand goes downward, stabbing through, strengthening the whirling turning force. And it improves the result from striking with the shoulder. We just introduced many of the application variations in the line system holding and lifting form. The main feature was the clearing to the outside movement. Sometimes when you strike the opponent, his force presses downward. At the same time, your arm must turn. In this way, I can strike the opponent. That's another method. You must pay attention to how to throw the opponent. In addition, if the opponent blocks, I can use seizing and grasping. This hand does an inward push. 3 joints can easily be broken here. I can use force and strike here. But of course, in the technique I just did, the hands can't just let go. You must first harm the opponent's joints, then go in for the shoulder strike. You must pay attention to the fine points contained within the technique. This hand rotates inward slightly. This hand presses on his elbow, then goes upward. This hand pushes downward, then execute a leaning strike. So according to different situations, for example, the opponent has strength, we can include seizing and grasping. You could execute a wrapping seizing strike. When you're practicing seizing, you must pay careful attention to the different techniques used. This is in the holding and lifting form. Pay attention to the following. The first technique is primary. You must seriously train it. Another variation would be to go behind the opponent rather than in front. Go behind with the lifting strike. We have going to the front. We can also turn to the back to use this lifting technique. It doesn't matter which technique. There are those that go up, those that go down, some that go to the front, and some that go behind. You must go according to the situation at the moment, the position where you're standing, and the height of your stance to decide the technique. For example, this is another variation. When the opponent pushes, you move with the force and move in to strike the opponent. Sometimes I can use a carrying strike. That's fine too. On top of the arm, underneath, holding, all are fine. Here you want to have the arm turned over, carrying or combing the arm downward. From here, downward about 10 centimeters, a combing motion, then grasp. This hand, when push attacking the opponent, the forefinger side of the palm first makes contact with the end of the shoulder, then rotates inward so that the middle, ring, and then pinky finger portions all make contact. There is also an elbow strike contained. Also add in the lower springing or inserting and closing off the opponent's leg, and you'll have a good result. Also, if the opponent pushes, you can hold and throw. Again, according to the situation. Here I transform. When the opponent pushes, then the opponent will be thrown down. Pay attention. When the opponent pushes, move with his force. Then strike. You can move back in the opposite direction and harm the opponent's elbow. So this is a type of out and back movement in the technique. You'll size up the situation differently according to the circumstances. This way is fine too. Coil around, then strike. So when you're executing these techniques, you must pay attention to strict body coordination. These were applications coming off the moving with the force or turning the back forms. You could also use the windmill form, moving upward. That can throw the opponent. Some points to pay attention to. This wants to slightly rise upward. Insert the arm here. When this arm inserts, it could go for one of the opponent's arms or it could take both of them. Once your arm has set up against the opponent's arm, there is a slight turning over as you continue the upward motion. Your elbow sets against his inner upper arm and moves to the outside. He is basically leaning into a fall. This is a moving with the force emitting strength. You'll get a good result. Sometimes you can press down on the opponent's arm. Then go here and lock him up. When you're locking him up, you want to press up against his leg and lean tightly against him. You must make the opponent uncomfortable. So, when the opponent strikes, go upward, make it a large upward movement so that the opponent blocks off his face. At this time, he may want to withdraw his hand. Move with and lock him up. This hand must protect. If the opponent has too much strength, you could use your shoulder and head to add force and the opponent can be knocked down. So in the application of yin-style bagua, you at the beginning don't want to completely use up all your force. In some special circumstances, you need to extend the force. It's also often said that if you don't have a second following force, it is difficult to defeat your opponent. So these are the things you must pay attention to in application. Also, the idea here isn't purely to go for this arm. You could try and go for the back arm as well, or the neck. They're all acceptable variants. You could also raise the knee. All are fine. Carrying him under your arm here. This requires that your angles and use of force are all appropriate. While training, you must research this so that when you go to use it, you'll have a high degree of proficiency. In many of the applications of the lion system sweeping strike forms, the technique is the same, but the use of force is different. Some are the same technique, but use differing body movement for completion. For example, the lying step form. I sweep strike the opponent. I can add in a different body movement and stepping, a type of dodging out of the way. I just did a type of moving with the force to the inside. You can also go to the outside. Both are fine. Pay attention to the usage of the leg. it should be extended a bit long. Then turn and the opponent will roll out off your body. This is fine too. A type of going out and returning force. He thinks I'm going to dodge over in this direction, so he pulls back in the other direction. This is a technique with going out and returning force. Sometimes it is best that you take this hand in a carrying, dodging strike. Pay attention to reciprocal usage. If I go to here and he pushes, I can go to here. This dodging requires many changes in your use of force. If I go to here and the opponent pushes, and I sweep strike, if I don't have it, I can change to an elbow too. This mainly emphasizes body movement and stepping. These are the points to pay attention to during practice. The forms have different names which reflect the differing theories behind them. For example, the enfolding form. Strike here, switch hands, hold the opponent. Pay attention. You shouldn't move to the back. You should move toward the side of the opponent. No matter how the opponent is standing, there are many weak places for you to attack. Usually, in the enfolding form, I can take this arm, use the foot, and I'll have it. Sometimes you can reverse the technique. Go here, then hold. There are many different methods and uses. I strike and the opponent pushes. Going this way is fine too. In this technique, you must pay attention to make the opponent push into emptiness, enter in, and engage this arm. All these tasks must be completed within this technique. Sometimes, if the opponent is unyielding, you can go in this way. In addition, the tiger pounces technique is fine too. If you can't get it, you can use an upward sweep. You can change as you please. Any movements that are of a type of sinking down, you could say are of enfolding or squatting and contracting. As long as you're using strength in a downward direction, they're all acceptable. If we combine in kicking, as soon as he takes on this force, he'll go down. So here, you're striking to make the opponent's force dissipate. If the opponent is really strong, and it is difficult to get him down in this way, you can move forward with the force. That's fine too. So you must change according to the movement of your opponent's center of balance. We just discussed applications of the lion sweeping strike, moving with a force form, holding a lifting form, and so on. Next, I'm going to talk about the turning the back and reversing the body forms. I feel that in a fight, if you're not in a very passive situation, or are standing at a very disadvantageous angle, you should not use turning the back. So you should emphasize using the turning the back form in a disadvantageous situation. When applying yin-style bagua, pay attention that as soon as you touch hands with the opponent, you should change. As soon as the opponent uses strength, you should turn. That's to say, as soon as you meet strength, you have to move. You must turn. You have to gain understanding through experience of these things, then go back and add in more practice time. In this way, you can enrich a lot of your techniques and thinking. In the turning the back form, I make contact, enter in, then the opponent pushes along. In this situation, you don't want to resist back against his direction of force. At the same time as his push, move around and strike. Pay attention to the rotation of the forearm here. When striking the opponent, whether I use a fist or a palm, this arm has got to take the opponent's arm and bind it. Move along with his force and wrap the arm up, taking the form of turning the back. In the turning the back form, the use of force is usually going upward, then downward, and striking. Of course, your choice of technique should accord with the situation. For example, I've done the technique once. The second time I can strike here. If I were to strike downward again, he may be ready for it this time. I could also throw. Go according to the situation. In addition, here he pushes me. This arm can follow with and clear the opponent's arm out of the way. Then lock up both of the opponent's arms. That's one variation. In addition, when he pushes, I could go downward and hold. So the forcing hand we often talk of also has many different variations. Here's a look at the same technique from a different angle. 1. A push. The arm must turn. Lock in his arm. You can also break him here. That's one way to do it. In addition, I get to here, move with, carry his arm downward, and entrap. That was going on top. Going below, I can throw the opponent. I could also spring the leg. Pay attention. I hold here. This hand, as I change, will strike the opponent. As I strike, my shoulder will press on the opponent. So pay attention that after the shoulder leans on the opponent, it must whirl and turn inward. It is very difficult for the opponent to break a whirling attack because he doesn't have an accurate single point of resistance to use against you. So when you practice, pay attention to this. In addition, pay attention to the use of the leg while you whirl around. If I pull back this leg, then the upper leg here can endanger the opponent. So we can go on top, from underneath, and returning back. Use different methods depending on your situation. What is different about reversing the body? When I make contact, pay attention. Striking here. There's a type of squeezing in and pressing. Speaking of the striking arm, turning the back tends to mostly strike low. Reversing the body will use both high and low strikes, but it tends to favor the higher strikes. What's different here? Pay attention to the circular transforming of the arm. I enter in, then I reverse and strike. Here's what you should pay attention to. The arm must roll. It's a round strength. Once I get to here, I turn my back. I can also strike above. This is the same. When I get to here, I can also add in a hand. Once I've used this hand, I can switch position and go with this. That's also reversing. We often say that. I go here, come across. This is also reversing. You can add in grasping or throwing. These methods are to add strength. There are many methods of reversing the body. Going here and then coming back. That's fine too. I can close off his leg here. A lot of the applications you've studied could be used here. Why is it called swimming body 8 trigrams interlocking palm? No matter whether it's between different animal systems, within one animal system, or within one type of attack method, within sweeping, within smashing, they can all be linked together. Dr. Xie used to say, rising, drilling, lowering, and turning over. It doesn't matter whether it's horizontal or vertical, it can all be connected together. Of course, this is easy to talk about, but to make it happen, to practice to that point, requires you to put in time. I hope that everyone makes a great effort to train hard. In application, everyone should pay attention to every aspect of the small details. For example, the leg aspect. When the opponent attacks, I could use a forcing hand in addition to a forcing step. Sometimes I could come forward more. The results are different. Also, I could move the back leg to force entry to the opponent's side. So yin-style bagua often talks of closing off the front and forcing the side. Whether you use the left or right hand, close off directly facing the opponent and force the side. In usage, you must pay attention to a lot of fine points. For example, I sweep to here. Where is the best place to sweep strike? After I sweep, how do I change? In this type of situation, if I end up here, the arm should turn slightly. You don't want to use force directly inward. You want to go towards the rear. You don't want to go directly down in a direction where you're going to take on force. You want to go at an angle. If you want to link in kicking, grasping, or throwing to the striking, for example, kicking, you can use the hands. These techniques can contain kicks. In addition, there's striking. Here, an elbow strike. Or you could hook and then sweep strike. When doing this, you also want to pay attention to slightly turn the hand. Hook downward. Then when the opponent tries to clear your arm away, you enter in. That's a type of technique that takes the middle. Now with this short arm, this requires that the opponent is trying to clear you outward. Then you enter in following his force. Then change again. So if you go here, you could chop. You could also go from here. So the same technique can be done on the left or on the right. You need to look at the position and angle that you stand at the time, and to get a feel for where the opponent is strong. Then you can change according to the changes of the opponent. In this way, you'll have the best results. In addition, if I'm going to bind the opponent, this hand slightly captures inward. The left hand has a bit of whirling inward with the knife edge of your palm on the opponent's elbow. When you get to here, the right hand forms a cross shape, pressing down on the opponent's forearm. At the same time, the left hand makes a fist, holding the opponent at just above his elbow. Then this hand moves slightly downward. If the opponent is not reacting in a way you want him to, be sure to look for the most uncomfortable place on your opponent. Pay attention. You can't execute the technique in this way, with this hand not using strength. You must bring the arm downward. Then you'll have a better result. If you've got good developed strength, you could do a cutting strike here and here. This is a type of hooking in cutting strike. Also, if I want to change to a chopping strike, it would be the same. You still shouldn't directly press downward. Your elbow should go inward. In this way, it's easy to strike down the opponent. This sweeping strike has a bit of a downward angle of force. The opponent's arm is resisting upwards. So through the change of the hand, you change to a different use of force. Also, here I could decide not to use the cutting strike. I could use a moving strike. The moving strike should not be placed at the same position as the cutting strike. It should be placed up under the armpit. Both arms have a twisting and turning together motion. This type of technique is well suited to handle a very strong opponent that you get locked up with. Once you've got him captured tightly, you must use the twisting of the waist and body to complete the technique. When training, you want to be aware that you can move along one single line and can also horizontally and vertically make contact. For example, in the moving with the force sweeping form. Here I sweep, then I inside sweep. You can also string together some complex things. I can sweep here, then comb down and strike here. Going here, not carry striking the opponent's other arm, but using my sweeping arm in a covering in motion. This can be done with many different techniques. With the holding and lifting form, when the hands make contact, go to here, sweep, then a rising sweep. In the form, it should be the left hand executing the technique. Here I just executed both moves with a single arm. So this is one part of connecting things together. In addition, a different technique, you see. Turn over and go here. You can open with a technique from the windmill sweeping form, then change to the hacking sweeping strike from the moving with the force sweeping form. So you must go according to the situation. You could also do this sweep. Take a step, then returning here. That's fine too. So it doesn't matter which technique you use. You must have many different methods of changing. For example, I intercept the arm here. This hand must carry down and then send his arm to your other hand. You must then hand off the opponent's arm in this way before you can go into the hacking sweep. If you're trying to draw out the opponent, then you must make a large movement to cause him to take the bait. If you're directly going for a strike, then you must have a small, fast movement. A turn of the forearm, changing to an inside sweep, is also fine. Striking to the same place on the opponent. The change in the technique and the change in the force are both very important. They must be paired with body movement. Here I can use squatting and contracting. Then I will grasp this hand very quickly. Once in this position, with both hands tied up, what do? You can engage in this way. This is fine too. This hand grasping the opponent. I can let go of the other hand and attack his elbow. Once I've grasped his hand at the wrist, then I use my elbow. If the opponent resists at the elbow, not allowing me to complete my movement, I can use the shoulder. If I have the elbow and shoulder in play and it's still not enough, I can use the knee. If even the knee isn't enough, then I can advance step and turn. So you must change the use of force to achieve a good result. So when applying the techniques, you must have different methods of application. Going here is fine too. Press down, then if I'm unable to press down, I can insert a leg. This is an alternating usage. When connecting together horizontal and vertical, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you can use 1, 5, 3, 2. You should think this over, so you'll be able to select an appropriate technique with a suitable application. Next, I'll talk about how to change from the lion system to other animal systems techniques. For example, a sweep strike. If I want to do a phoenix technique after the sweep, for a dodging strike, the hand moves along the opponent's arm in a downward arc. My left hand protects here. Then I can strike above, below, or to the groin. As I have mentioned before, you can strike high, mid-level, or low. If the opponent blocks, I can bring the arm back, then change to a dodging strike to the back of the opponent. The main thing to pay attention to is that I make use of the phoenix method of entrapping. Then padding strike. I can also use a hooking leg. At the moment when the opponent is already about to fall, you add in the kick. That's using the phoenix system. I can also go towards the back and dodging strike there. I can dodge strike to any of these places. They're all fine. Here, the similar aspect is that we have opening to the outside. We can also open and go here. If the opponent blocks, I change in this way, and it is difficult for his block to be successful. Or I can sweep strike, then use an extending strike. The use of the sweeping strike allows you to change into a lot of other techniques. I can use many different phoenix techniques. I can also use transforming and removing. I can sweep and then chop to here. Here I can sweep and chop to here, and then hooking back in. So there are a lot of changes. So if you practice phoenix, how do you add in the use of the transforming, removing, curling in, and stabbing strikes? I can dodge strike in this way. If he blocks, then change. I add in the shoulder strike. You want to remove along the direction of the opponent's force. Yin-style bagua states that as soon as the hands go out, you change. Change, change, change. The changes are endless. If you practice the dragon system, I sweep here, then push forward, changing to the dragon palm. Then changing here. I can do a moving strike here. Sometimes the dragon directly enters. Here I have seizing and grasping. If you train well and make a habit, as soon as you meet the opponent's hand, you will be able to grasp. In addition, I can go here and push strike, pushing here. A sweep strike, then a moving strike. Here is a capturing strike. This is a capturing grasp. I press in here, he resists, then I let go and can strike him. That's fine too. Sometimes I can sweep, then poke in, then moving strike here and here. I can sweep strike, then capturing strike. Capturing again. These are all capturing strikes. This is the same. Capturing, capturing. If I capture here, I can pull and break the arm. Pay attention to the technique. I sweep, turn the hand, capture here. This hand still captures. This way is a chop. If I change the shape of the technique, it becomes capturing. Here I am still capturing. An arm capturing strike. There are many different methods of use. Here I sweep, then an empty capturing strike, then capturing here. Then I can go here and capture. Then I can change to block off the opponent, and then go here. That is fine too. So there are quite a number of changes. Sometimes I can go directly into a pushing strike. The opponent might withdraw his arm. If he does, I can go here, then push forward. I can push the elbow. I can directly strike. These are both uses of the pushing strike. I can close off his front leg. I can force the front, or I can withdraw the step and allow him to advance. These methods can all be used. So sometimes you can do as you please, but before that stage, you must first seriously practice your skills. Speaking of the bear system, I sweep and the opponent has more strength than I do. I can go to here, then leaning strike. If I add in this stepping and body movement, then it is different. Here is a pulling elbow that will easily harm the opponent. Here I can strike low, mid-level, or high. You must go according to the situation. Here I can strike directly after the sweep, directly entering in. With this technique, your hand horizontally executes the stamping strike, then goes vertical upon contact. In that way, you'll have a better result. So some things depend on how you use them. Here I can use a closing off rushing strike. Here is also acceptable. That is a type of closing off rushing strike as well. Sometimes I can sweep, go low, then strike from above. These are from the forms of the bear system. Or I can sweep. I don't necessarily have to go low. I can go high as well. Then a cutting, throwing motion. So when you're using the bear system, the main emphasis is on the rushing, penetrating, withdrawing, and carrying strikes. I can sweep here, then hold. I can obtain a good result this way. I set him up on my shoulder. If I don't have it, then I can change the use of force. From propping him up here, I turn the hand slightly, causing the muscles of his upper arm to twist and turn slightly. I cause my own shoulder to act as a pivot point, then allow him to slide on it. That's even better. Sometimes I can sweep strike, then strike here, handing off. Then I leaning strike. I can use the leaning strike, rushing, penetrating, withdrawing, carrying, leaning, shocking, soft, and following. Here's an example of using the following strike. These are all fine. So when you're training, it doesn't matter which animal system. I can sweep and go here or here. The same stepping and body movement, combined with different strikes, can be used to get a feel for the differences between lion, phoenix, and bear systems. So in the application of yin-style bagua, there is single application, double application, applications of a single attack method within an animal system, applications using multiple attack methods from the same animal system. Objectively speaking, it doesn't matter what skill you practice. There are different stages to it. So what I require of everyone's practice is that at the beginning, including applications practice, first try to be very open and large, then later be very tight and compact. At first, practice to trace out the way a technique should be executed. Train it a lot, then over time you will figure out the minute changes inside the technique. At what point should I change? At what point should the force be a little larger, a little more pliant? Where should the speed be faster? Where should the body movement be a little better coordinated? And including the placement of your stepping. These are all extremely important and are all very realistic things. Through practicing this, you will then be able to make the next stage of training more well-knit. You will get a feel for yin-style Bagua's precise, carefully put-together techniques and flexible stepping. The stepping aspect is relatively smaller, but when combined with complex hand techniques, can help to create a better than expected result. In these applications, I've talked about many different techniques and types of body movement. Next, I'll talk about some stepping methods. When using these applications in a fight, stepping can have an important function. We often say in yin-style Bagua that the techniques must be very careful and precise, and the stepping is very nimble and flexible as the technique changes. Careful and precise techniques means that in a fight, in the instant as the technique changes, the position of the hand, the place where you grasp the opponent, the method of using force, must all be just right for the situation. As for stepping, we have an opening step. You must pay attention. When you're extending an arm towards the opponent, don't take too large of a step. Yin-style Bagua emphasizes the small step. 3 steps are 1 step. No matter what system of martial arts, most all have 3 basic types of steps. The first is an opening step. The second is attacking, advancing. The third is a back step. Backstepping, retreating, withdrawing steps, they all fall under the category of back step. We practice the zigzag step, the box step, and the 3-step methods to help develop your stepping. Of course, the positioning of your step is also very important. When you start off, you want to force the position of the step. Force the position so that you can enter. Pay attention that the feet are parallel to one another. They should not be opened or hooked in. You'll have the best result in that way. Closing off his leg in this way, you'll be able to apply strength. This way is not so good. So as to stepping, the first is the opening step. The second is entering. When you encounter a situation where the opponent tries to get away, going according to the situation, you could step on his foot. You want to try and judge the direction that the opponent is trying to move in and use these methods. In addition, there's the moving up of your back leg. Sometimes you step with the front leg and the back leg follows up. The purpose of the back leg doing this is to even out your balance. You don't want the angle of separation of your legs to get too big or too small. You want to keep the most comfortable angle for you, the one that you're accustomed to and train the best with. That's the first point. The second point, when you're going to use it, open to where is appropriate. For example, I've opened and want to enter. I want to close off his front leg with my back leg. Open generously so that when you step through, the opponent's body is angled. I have an intersecting, moving against force here that can easily throw the opponent down. You must pay attention to all parts of the technique. The shoulder emitting force. If I've executed the technique poorly, then I move with the force and take him down with a squeezing and holding motion. As to the stepping, 1, don't be too far away. Then it's hard to move across. Usually starting here, then stepping to here is best. In addition, once I've opened, I can advance this step. No matter whether using this technique or a transforming removing method. You must pay attention to this leg being bent as it moves in. Getting close, then spring the leg straight. In that way, your legs will produce a second force. If stepping forward, step through generously to give the opponent a feeling of losing his balance. When training, pay attention to the appropriate positioning of the step, including this, going to here, hooking with the foot, You must hook an appropriate amount, not too much. It should be pressing against the opponent's foot. So you must pay attention to the stepping, closing off of the opponent's leg, and the positioning of your foot. Previously, I had opened in this way, with my foot forming a T shape with his. Sometimes you will use techniques that will close off his legs and push forward at the elbow and pull back his hand. Sometimes, if I encounter a lot of force from the opponent, I will backstep and enter into here. Note that this foot also forms a T shape with the opponent's foot. Look and see where you stand in relation to the opponent. Sometimes I will go like this to move forward and throw. For throwing, I can throw going to his rear, front, or horizontally across. If I want to throw going across, I step and follow up with the rear leg, then step behind. There is also advanced stepping in and directly sweeping the leg in. As to stepping in the forms, each animal system has 7 different stepping patterns. So while you're training, you must pay attention to how they are paired and used with the techniques. From the point of view of stepping, sometimes you want to go to the rear. Stepping to the rear includes the hooking in step and the swinging open step. The swinging open step isn't necessarily for closing off the opponent's leg. Sometimes it's used to get around the opponent. Hands make contact, advance with this foot, and get around the opponent, getting around back to his front. Why in Yin style Bagua do we speak of 3 steps being as 1 step? It doesn't matter what usage situation you're in. There's always opening, advancing, and backstepping. In the beginning, turning the circle is considered a very basic practice, but later on it becomes a profound practice. I often say that through turning the circle, a body that is stiff and has an impeded circulation can be made to be flexible with a very good circulation. Stepping that is clumsy can be made to be very nimble. This is basically all I'll say about stepping for now. So according to different situations, you will use different stepping methods. Sometimes you dodge out of the way, and then stabbing through step. There's a bit of a sliding along the ground to it. The requirement for this is that your angle must be stable and you must be coordinated, and including this helping out body movement. Here I'm slowly looking for the correct stepping. I want to close off his leg, and now I've stepped and this foot is parallel to his front foot. Then I can step through and throw. It's also possible to step so that my foot is in a T formation with his foot. I do that so I can execute a hooking leg. Then I step down and hook kick here. This is also different. So there are also a lot of changes with the legs you can use, going according to the situation with the opponent. Here I close off the leg and then pull back in. This will cause the opponent to lose balance. So I've blocked off his leg and then I quickly pull back in. So you want to coordinate the stepping you use to be the most balanced and appropriate for your situation. I've said it before and I'll say it again. These things must be experienced slowly over time through practice, adjusting the way you step. In a situation where you're not quite familiar with the technique yet, or the result is not what you want, pay attention to adjusting your stepping. Check and see if your technique is not very well coordinated with your use of stepping. Check and make sure that you're not taking too large of a step. I often say you can't have too much, but you can't not have enough. This could also be said about technique, use of force, developmental methods, and stepping. So while you're training, spend a lot of time researching these aspects. Spend a lot of time training. And through the application of these techniques and training applications, over time, get a feel for the profoundness and subtlety of these techniques. When talking about stepping, as with baguachjang, it may look simple, but practicing it is difficult. Now I'll introduce a few changes using hand techniques coordinated with stepping. the opponent attacks, I force the step, going here, then here, and a withdrawing step. 1. I open, working with the hand technique, going to here, striking here, withdraw step. This is one way to do it. In lion system, I open, then the foot opens horizontally, going to here. When the opponent presses down, pay attention. When I'm using this first attack, the leg must close off tightly. You don't want to skip over this in order to prepare for the second and third techniques. Why? Because if you execute this properly, the opponent will be thrown down. What I'm talking about is if the opponent presses my arm, preventing me from executing this technique. So, stepping to pay attention to. 1. Open. 2. Move. 3. So your stepping, body movement, and technique coordination must be very appropriate. When training, you want to make sure to accomplish these things. Sometimes I open, then go to here and here. Here this can help out, pressing into the opponent's leg. So you must be ready with these minute changes at any time. So when training, pay attention to the different ways of executing techniques. Sometimes I can open, go to here, and then come back. When I get to here, it becomes difficult to continue. So the foot comes back, and in that way I have an appropriate angle to use. A lot of things are the same. Through repeated practice, you'll be able to get it. Going to here is fine too. I can use different hand techniques with the same stepping patterns. So you can practice these stepping patterns in a lot of different ways by pairing them with different hand techniques. Here, going an advanced step, following along the movement of the arm. Going to here, the foot can twist. You can't be too fast or too slow. Here, moving too soon. Or having the arm all ready to here and then stepping is too late. So you must step along with the technique. In this case, there's almost a dodging out of the way. I can execute a hooking leg or a step behind. So going according to different changes, use different stepping. Whatever you use, it must be appropriate. Here is too little. I won't be able to close off the back leg. So I step around a bit more, making the opponent uncomfortable. Then I can lean into him and I'll have it. So the different usages of stepping are very important. When training, pay a lot of attention to it. For now, I'll just introduce these few simple technique and stepping combinations.